Today, on Escape the Clock, we're aiming to answer the question, what happens to everything we built if someone decides to sue us? Consider this. According to a Chubb's 2024 wealth report, 92% of high net worth individuals say they are concerned about the financial impact of a liability lawsuit, yet only 28% of them carry enough coverage to actually protect themselves. It's not bad luck waiting to happen, that's a system. And once your net worth crosses a certain threshold, you're statistically wealthier than the vast majority of Americans, and that makes you a target. A car accident, a tenant injury, a business dispute, a former partner with a grudge, any one of these things can put everything that you built on the table. So how do we protect ourselves from the people who are legally looking to take from us? To answer this question, I'll be joined by someone who is uniquely positioned to answer this. He spent his career at the intersection of tax, law, and financial strategy. Matt Meredith will be joining me. He's an attorney, a certified financial planner, and the founder of Meridian Legal Advisors. And he's the architect of an integrated wealth protection approach that brings legal, tax, and investment expertise under one roof, designed to hold up in the moments most plans fail. So today, we get into the specific structures and decisions that protect what we built. From the basic mistakes that most high earners are still making with estate plans, to the advanced strategies that keep wealth out of reach when someone decides to come for it. So if you were thinking it would be great to talk to a lawyer about your financial well-being, then this is a conversation you can't afford to miss. So stay tuned for my conversation with Matt Meredith and learn how to bulletproof your wealth, plan ahead of the threats, and protect the financial independence you are working so hard to live off of. Welcome back to Escape the Clock, the show where we highlight strategies and approaches for achieving financial freedom and having the option not to work. I'm your host, Daniel C. Rogers. There's this particular kind of devastation that comes from a bad investment or a market crash, but from a single phone call from an attorney you never met can be a whole different type of an event. You might feel like you've done everything right, you've paid off debt, maxed out your retirement accounts, and you've built real tangible wealth. And then a car accident, a tenant injury, a business dispute, or a disgruntled former partner, and suddenly everything you've spent decades for is exposed. The financial independence community talks endlessly about building wealth, but almost nobody talks about what happens when someone else comes to take it. The numbers are sobering. The United States has more than one attorney for every 292 residents. The number of civil lawsuits filed every year continues to climb. Once your net worth crosses a certain threshold, you are statistically wealthier than the vast majority of Americans, and that makes you a target. What makes this even more dangerous is that most estate plans are built to distribute wealth, not protect it. They're written for the best case scenario, not for the moment when a creditor or a plaintiff or a tax authority comes knocking. The people who get through those moments unscathed didn't get lucky. They planned ahead before there was any threat on the horizon. Today's guest has spent his career at exactly that intersection: law, tax, and financial strategy working together to protect everything his clients have worked to build. Matt Meredith is an attorney and a certified financial planner with over 20 years of experience, including senior leadership roles at JP Morgan Securities and Capital One Investing. He's the founder of Meridian Legal Advisors, where he delivers an integrated approach, bringing legal, law, and investment expertise under one roof so his clients' wealth plans actually hold up and matters most. Matt, welcome to Escape the Clock.
It's good to be here, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'd love for you to take us back to when it really crystallized for you why asset protection has to be built into, especially a financial independence conversation earlier, like from maybe the beginning, and why a lot of people are missing that.
Definitely. So my background was wealth management, and I did wealth management, started as an equities trader back in 2005, and moved out to Boca, set up a trading desk, and then the big recession market crash came in and trading was over. So I got into financial advising, and I jumped up with JP Morgan. And this was the first time I really saw things that were different than the trading. It was the advising. And I had this client, very wealthy, and he had all of his money in an account, and he ended up getting a judgment credit against him, and they came after him. And I, as a financial advisor, I didn't understand what having assets in your name really meant at that time. I was still early in my career, but I saw what it did, and I saw what he had built spent so much time building, slowly become a target of something that he had no real control over. He just thought he was going to play golf that day. He didn't know he was going to get into an accident and get sued. And from that point on, I took an approach that was a little bit different. It was, what can you do to protect this? Of course, at that point, I wasn't an attorney, so I didn't know how to protect it. That actually happened a little bit later in life as you start adding in the legal aspects of it. I went to law school at 38. The focus was tax, estate planning, and it came out because I wanted that one-stop shop. I didn't like that a client would come in. I knew the answer, but I wasn't an attorney or I wasn't a CPA, and the firm didn't want us to get the answer to it, so you'd have to send them off. You get misaligned advice, fragmented information coming back in. I said, no, this has to be done better. And so that was the goal: go to law school, bring it all under one roof, and offer it for it. And as I started adding estate planning and business and tax to my practice, the natural next step was, we need to protect these assets. It's no longer, hey, distribution. It's no longer make you a better return. It's everything wrapped into one package. That, how do we build it? How do we protect it? How do we distribute it? And so that's really how I got into it. I was with, you learn in different ways. I worked for a firm as a consultant that was heavy in asset protection. That's where I really got my introduction to it. And then from there, you just start building out more as you learn more.
Yeah, the scale of this is actually really large. There's 100 million civil lawsuits filed in U.S. state courts annually, and high net worth individuals are disproportionately targeted because the judgment against them is usually worth collecting. And that was actually data that came from an actual American legal system report back in 2024. So it's probably even higher today. And so I'm kind of curious, when you're working with clients, is there like a specific net worth you're seeing that's creating a more meaningful target for litigation? Or is it kind of just more all over the place? Where are you seeing the red flags when it comes to risk?
So I'll say this: we don't sue poor people. That, as bold and blunt as that is, that's the reality. When a client comes in, they've been wrong, they want to sue somebody, say real estate, something like that. The first question is, well, how much money do they have? Is there anything to get? And then followed up by, who are they? Can we get to them? That's the next question. As far as protecting it, I talk all the time that there is really no number. What is worth it in your life that's worth protecting? Is it a business that you built? Is it a sum of money that, hey, I just don't want to lose this money, I'm going to protect it? I think it's different for everybody. If you're making a ton of money at that moment, you're not so much worried about, oh, somebody might come in and grab a portion of it. But if you built something that's huge and you've benefited from it, you may want to, at that point, sit back and say, all right, I want to distribute this to my people and not to somebody else. How do I do that? And so it varies with everybody. It's not just for the ultra wealthy. And that was the biggest pushback I got when I first joined into asset protection was, oh, well, I'm not Elon Musk, I have nothing to worry about. No, you do, because you've got 10, 20, some of these lawsuits are small. Give me $50,000 and I'll go away. I don't want to give somebody $50,000. I'd rather spend a little bit of money to protect mine than to give out $50,000.
Oh yeah, like any lawsuit against you, any number of someone trying to take money from you in that situation probably feels anything over a penny is too much, I'd imagine.
Well, and it's not just that. Take a look at there's other types of things. Let's say even if you win the case, you still have to spend all this money to protect. And that's what we see is, okay, I'm going to win, but now I still had to pay an attorney $25,000 to defend me on something that I knew I would win, because this is a litigious country. We sue people. It's part of a business strategy for some people. So it becomes, build it out right. And then when they come to you to try to sue you, you start laughing at them saying, good luck.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's kind of scary. So, what are some of the common triggers that people should be thinking about here? Is it, oh, I'm fine because unless I get in a car accident or, I get hurt, someone gets hurt in my property, outside of that, I'm okay? Or are there other surprise things that are getting people?
So everybody prepares for the things we can think of. I'm an attorney. I have E&O insurance. Something could go wrong. I could be sued. That is a known risk. And I'm able to bring in insurance, bring in specific structuring to protect in certain ways. And that's what we think about. If you have a lawn mowing company, you're thinking, okay, well, a rock could shoot across the side and somebody could get hurt from it. These are common things. It's the hidden risk we don't think about. It's the somebody slips and falls in your store because somebody did something wrong, or it's something where, like you mentioned, it's a car accident where, oh, I've got insurance, everything's fine. I see all the time the insurance doesn't cover it. Now they're coming after the individual personally. It's what we don't expect that I find gets us more often, and it gets us in a worse position because we insure and we protect the things that we know are very risky, but it's the little things we don't. Your dog bites somebody. That happens all the time. Lawsuits come out all the time. Oh, well, I have homeowners insurance. It should protect me to an extent. But what if there's negligence? What if you did bad faith? And then they're like, hey, we're not touching this. So it varies. And there's all kind of things that we worry about. It's the ones we don't worry about that we see the most often come through court.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. So, is there a window after a lawsuit's filed where it's too late to protect anything? Like, what's the timing look like to do this right?
If you show up to me after a lawsuit's been filed, I can't help you. This is, and I joke because tax is the perfect example of it. Is people show up to me like, I owe the IRS all this money. I got to move my money. Where do I move it? And so I give them the Department of Treasury's address, and I say you should move it there, and that'll take care of it for you. But that's the thing with asset protection. Once the litigation is initiated, it's too late. Once there's a cluster of activity coming in, you can't go move your assets and say, oh, sorry, you're too late. No, the court comes in all the time and says, we're undoing this structure. You did unjust movement. And that becomes the main issue people have. And so I see it all the time in not just tax, but in asset protection. Hey, I think I'm being sued. They sent me a demand letter. I need to move my assets. And at that point, I say, look, I can't help you. Maybe another attorney will, but most likely it's going to be undone. So you're going to spend a lot of money to have it done. And then the court's going to slap you for it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So it's more of a preventative thing for sure.
Correct.
You mentioned estates, and I really wanted to touch on that one with you quite a bit. So 64% of wealthy individuals who decided they'll have their assets inherited, they'll take legal steps to make that happen. But most of that's traditional estate planning. But estate planning is typically designed for distribution. It doesn't really have built-in defenses against creditors or litigation. Now, I'm not saying you can't, make an estate plan that can be protective, but I don't think a lot of people think of estate plans that way. They think about how does my money after my death go to where I want it to go so I don't go through probate. Can you talk about specific steps, one that maybe a creditor would go through when they're looking at estate plans, which makes them a risk for that, and things that people might do to set them up more properly?
Definitely. So here's your common estate plan. I'm going to distribute to my spouse and my kids. That's pretty much how it works. Well, that works great if we live in a perfect world. But how often are the kids up to something, or they might have problems, or say they're just spendthrifters? How do you protect against that? I recently had a gentleman, older children, but he didn't want the possibility that one of his sons would divorce, and the spouse of the son, his daughter-in-law, who he has no good feelings for, to inherit anything. And so that means we can't just give it directly to the son. There could be issues with this. So now we have to plan for that. It's the same thing with creditors. Let's say you've got a child or just anybody in your life that has problems with creditors, has a bunch of liens coming to them, well, you better not give them that money, because once it leaves that trust or leaves that estate, now it's a target for these creditors. So you build in based on the situation. How do I protect from this situation? What did we do for the gentleman with the spouse and potential divorce? We created a subtrust off of the trust we created. Now the subtrust will be run by, a trustee who is probably going to be a family member in this case, and he can distribute for health, education, maintenance, support. He can go buy property for this gentleman. Hey, you want a new house? The trust will buy you a house. And so now he never truly owns it. So if there is a divorce or there are creditors, they can't just walk into the trust and say, hey, that money's for him, give it to us. No, sorry. There's spendthrift clauses, there's protections. He doesn't own it. So why are you coming to my door knocking, asking me to give you money that isn't his? And so this is the part of planning that I stress all the time for people, because I often see this come through where I have this situation, I want this done. And I don't see the option of it on my online wheel on how to build this out. And there's a reason for that, is because it's more complex and you can't really just build that into a form. And so what I spend a lot of time with people is family dynamics. What is going to happen? Who are these people? How is money going to be spent? How do you want it distributed? And here's the funny thing, Daniel, is sometimes they're kicked back from the children. And I get a phone call from the person we're doing the plan for that says, oh, my son's really mad at me, and I think I'm going to distribute it all outright to him. And it normally takes just 3 minutes of me explaining why that's a bad idea, to where you're right. I'm calling my son. This is my money. We're doing it my way. And it's like, good. That's the mentality that should be had.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine options get very limited when you're in reactive mode, for sure, which leads me to ask you about LLCs, because I would love to hear, like, do people over rely on those more than what they can actually provide there? Or do you see those as actually a pretty powerful tool for people?
So it all depends on jurisdiction. Some jurisdiction is more protective of the company and the owner than other jurisdictions. Here's a perfect example. If everything's done in your name, all of your assets are up for grabs. Everybody knows that. That's why nobody wants to be a sole proprietor anymore. So when you do it in an LLC, it's separating that liability. You can't breach my LLC protective barriers and come and get me unless I fell under certain things. So what are some of these certain things that we see happen all the time? Somebody goes and creates an LLC, pays $300 online, and that's their business. So they have no formal documentation. They have nothing that shows I am operating in a business here versus myself. They commingle personal funds with business funds. There's no true accounting update. So a court comes and looks at it and says, look, this is just an alter ego. You're doing business as yourself. You just named it something else. We're going to pierce that corporate veil and we're going to come in and get you personally. That happens all the time. So how do you protect about that? Treat it as a separate entity. Do the real things. I get comments all the time as, no, I don't need an operating agreement. I don't, me and my partners will figure it out. And then a little bit later, hey, we've got a problem. We don't know how to handle it. And I always say, well, your operating agreement should tell you how to handle it. Oh, that's right. You didn't want to make an operating agreement. And so we've got the issues here. Another issue I see all the time is the commingling, and really heavily with the commingling, going to trips to Hawaii, doing things that are ridiculous. That won't give you protection. Somebody's going to come in and say, look, this again is just alter ego. We're breaching this. And so that is an important aspect to realize. But here's where a lot of the more complex planning comes in. Let's say you have a business where you have inventory or you have equipment. Let's say, just for easy purposes, you're an oil company, you have operations and you have equipment. Well, most people put all of this together in one package. And so what happens? The equipment breaks down, somebody gets injured, you get sued. Well, now your equipment is at risk as well as your operations. Why? Because it's all in this basket together. And so when you get into more asset planning type strategies for businesses, you start actually breaking the business up into multiple businesses. Why? Because one holds assets, the other does the operations. We see this all the time with properly done real estate investing. You have your rental company that goes out, makes contracts, hires the roof guys, the contractors to keep it going. If there's a dispute, they're not suing the asset company. There's no privy of contract there. And so they have to sue the operations company. Well, guess what? I don't keep hundreds of $1,000s in my operations company. I move it out to a separate holding company that holds my personal assets, or maybe the asset holding company of the actual asset itself. And so there's limited ability to get in there and say, hey, we're taking everything. No, it's typically, well, I've got a couple of $1,000s. That'll probably go to the bankruptcy attorney. So why don't we settle instead? And that's where you really start protecting yourself.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, an oversimplified way of saying that is separating your assets fully from your liability area, right? Because the operations might be where some of the liability is, but there's no assets in there. That could be a target to litigation. So imagine somebody has a basic estate plan. Maybe they have a basic LLC structure. They're coming to meet with you. What's the first question they should be asking you, or what's the first question you might want to ask them to help them start to see what they should be doing?
So I always start with a very basic question, and it's the worst question that anybody's going to hear that day. It's, if you die today, what's going to happen? And some people know, other people have no idea. And if they have no idea, the question then becomes, what do you want to happen? Because that's what it is. And I've learned with estate planning that estate planning, it's not about dying. It's not about me as a descendant going away. It's about the people who are left here, who I love, I cherish. I have worked so hard in life to get somewhere to gather things. I want it to go to them so that everything has a purpose. You know, the old Ecclesiastes, it's all in vain, but at least let me give it to somebody. So, and that's what the estate planning is for, is it's for incapacity. If something happens to me and I don't die, what is going to happen when I wake up, when I get back there? And so from there, you start looking at that ordeal as a whole package. And a lot of estate planners, they just look at the debt side. A lot of business people just look at the business side. Because of my background and my financial side and law side, I wrap it all into one so that I can see, all right, what's going to happen with the business? Where do we need to put this business so that if something happens for you, it continues on? Because a lot of times, and people don't realize this, your business has to go through probate when you die. Ownership has to change. So you have this booming business, you become incapacitated or you die, there still needs to be control. So what do? Well, you place that business in a trust so that there's a successor trustee that can go to the bank and say, I'm the trustee. I need access to this money for payroll so I can keep my employees on and the business can continue. I've seen multiple times where somebody died, the widow can't get access to the business until probate's done. And at that point, the business is nothing. And you sit there thinking, wow, this gentleman or this lady spent their whole life building a company and it's now collapsed. Death is a terrible thing for the living to go through, but to watch everything they've worked for afterwards crumble down, that's really hard.
Oh, yeah, I can't even imagine. There might be people who have maybe a good CPA, maybe other people have a good attorney. Really fortunate people might have both, but not everyone has a good CPA and attorney. You do both these things. And so I'm curious, that gives you a very unique perspective here. What does an integrated tax and legal strategy look like in your mind compared to what most people might think of when they're working with two separate individuals or missing one of those aspects completely in their plan?
Sure. So as a financial advisor, which is my background, wealth management, all I had was a hammer. So everything was a nail. I could only do certain things. And so when people would come in and ask about tax situations or legal situations, I really couldn't answer it. I couldn't make tax moves that would save a lot of money, especially with a lot of these firms I've worked for. It's, well, did you just advise your client to take money out of the brokerage account and put it into real estate? A, you shouldn't be doing that. And B, why would you do that? But as an attorney now, I can turn around and say, let's pull money from this brokerage account because we're going to do tax strategy. Tax strategy is much different than accounting. Tax strategy is looking forward, planning, taking the best you can from the deductions. Accounting is just, hey, this is what we did. And so when it comes to setting up these things, it becomes, how do we form a business that is owned by the estate plan so that it carries on, but we can do certain tax moves that will save us ultimately a lot of money and time. And here's the thing with tax strategy that most people don't get. It's not really moving money into my 401k and things like that. While this will save you money, that's more accounting. I don't want to give up my right to use the money for a long time. I want to save taxes and still have that money worthwhile. So tax strategy really gets into using that money that you would pay the government, but putting it into something that will give you a depreciation value that will lower your AGI. So now you didn't really pay that money to the government, but you own an asset. Yeah. And that asset could be, a syndication. It can be real estate. I love real estate for tax purposes. Yeah. And so you have an asset that grows in value that should generate income for you, and you've lowered your overall taxes that year. And when you combine all this together, it really starts making sense. And here's the beautiful thing about tax strategy, which I talk about all the time, but most people don't. Tax strategy, the amount you save, pays for everything else. It pays for an estate plan. It pays for business formation. It pays for asset protection. And it covers the own cost of meeting for a tax strategy plan. And people sit there all the time saying, oh, no, tax strategy, it's too expensive and all this stuff is too expensive. No, when you put it all together, it works out perfectly.
Yeah, it makes a balance. Yeah, and everything.
Correct. And in addition, for me, it was no longer doing it in silos. You need somebody who sees everything. Now, do I do their tax return? No, I hate doing tax returns. I'm a tax attorney. I know everything that's being done, but for me to do a tax return, it's going to cost you a lot more just because I'm doing it. And so I always say,
there's other people who would probably be really happy to get paid to go do those as well.
Exactly. And people who will do it more efficiently. My problem is I'll obsess over it for way more hours than I want. So that's fine. Let my CPA, who I hired for this, to do it. And that really becomes the ordeal. Is it's looking at with the CPA saying, what are we doing? Okay, we're going to do an S Corp election on this LLC, or we're buying this syndication. The CPA then turns to me and says, Matt, I need you to protect this syndication, this asset, if my client gets sued. So then I build out the asset protection structure and the LLCs for it. And then it's all linked back to the estate plan in case something happens that, hey, this carries forward. And you can't really do that in silos because there has to be communication.
I'd love to get into asset protection now, because a lot of people are going to be thinking about, great, how do I start to protect myself? And I want to ask you about your hierarchy of protection, like how you think about ordering, because there was this Lake Harris law recommendation that had come out that said once a lawsuit is filed and judgment's in motion, it's generally too late to restructure. So they had basically suggested that before that, you need to do and properly fund LLCs and then do domestic asset protection trusts and umbrella insurance. That you need all three of those things in place way before the threat appears. How do you think about the hierarchy of protection? Do you have an order of operations, like a checklist you look like? How do you help people with that?
So there's normally where are we at? Every individual is going to be different. Typically, where I start is somebody already has a business. And we're coming in and we're cleaning up. Doesn't mean people don't come up and say, hey, look, I'm ready to start a business. It's just at that point, they don't have all the assets yet. So it's a different approach. But for people who have a business, it starts with, we need to break this up. We need to separate inventory. We need to separate IP goodwill. We have just the operations side. Everything else is the lease back or inventory agreement, something like that. But you don't want just free floating LLCs. So let's take another level. Let's try to build in anonymity and use a holding company structure. So Wyoming, Delaware, there's all kind of holding companies. I personally like Wyoming, but that's because Wyoming is hot. So Delaware is not. And so you start building out this. And so this also builds in some protection, especially in Texas. So let's say your company is sued and they do get a judgment. Well, it's very hard to get through the LLC and the Wyoming holding company or whatever holding company you're using and force distributions. Now they can get your distributions. They can still get the judgment and they can still try to come after it. But it's more of a negotiation tactic at that time. It's, hey, I'm making a salary. I live in Texas, so you can't really garnish my wages unless certain circumstances are happening. So I'm just going to not pay myself from these companies until we come to the table. And here's the thing that I've learned about law. People come to the table. Why? Because something is better than nothing, and nobody has patience in this world. So they will say, you know what? Give me X amount and we'll call it a deal. And so you can't 100%. Well, technically you can. There's ways, but it becomes astronomically expensive to do it. So for most people, it's let's protect from these certain type of situations. And from there, we adjust. We bring in insurance. We try to do it right so that if something does happen, it makes it really difficult for people to come through.
I was just curious because you mentioned insurance there. So where does the umbrella insurance in your mind fit in, and where does it fall short? Like, should everyone be thinking about that?
I think everybody should use insurance. Insurance is going to be your umbrella, your E&O, your general liability. You have it there because hopefully that's going to stop it. But where insurance fails is A, you underinsured, or B, you did something that was bad. And insurance is saying, we're not covering you on this. Or here's another example is, and you know, I'm a estate planner and I do probate, so I have a lot of morbid examples. But
I imagine
you're coming home and you hit a school bus, or just not a school bus. Let's not make it that morbid. You hit a bus, a city bus, and not just one, but multiple people pass away, and it's beyond your insurance capabilities. So now they're coming at you personally. And so that's where the asset protection kind of comes in is, hey, I've insured, I've tried to protect, but what if it goes over? What if those hidden risks that we didn't think about come in and kick everything up?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So people should be thinking about reviewing their coverage amounts and looking for those insurance gaps. I imagine that's a big way to kind of shore things up. Do you find that there's any other blind spots people typically have, especially people here who are thinking about financial independence, who are just wanting to like accumulate enough and then protect it because you got to live off of that? You know, you can't have anyone taking any of that money away from you. What would you help someone in that scenario who knows that they've saved every dollar, they have enough, and they have to make it last?
So for that, I often speak with financial advisors a lot. And being that I still do the investment management through a side company, it's a conversation I have with my clients is, hey, you've done a great job, but what happens if something happens and now you have a judgment? Let me tell you, the first thing they're going for is that brokerage account. So how do we protect that? Because I think having to go back to work would be it'd be debilitating in life. After, hey, I built it all, I'm ready to go, but now a mistake happened and somebody took it from me. And so it really becomes, how do we protect that? If there's taxable issues because it's a lot of money, that's really kind of a given. We're breaking out irrevocable trust. We're building things out like that. If it is more along the lines of, you know, it's under that taxable amount, but it's still a lot of money, then we start looking at, okay, how can we separate it out again? Do we create a holding company and stick it in there with other assets? But again, we have to protect that on certain levels, because if they do get through it, we want more protection. And then the certain type of trust for investment accounts actually exists. And so you can build that type of stuff out as well. There's a whole toolbox of different things you can use to really protect it. But a lot of people don't do it, I find, because it's not worth the costs and the figuring it out. Well, when does it become worth it? Right when you get that letter, and then you're like, oh my God, I better go talk to somebody. Oh, it's too late now.
Yeah, I mean, work so hard to get there and then have to worry all the time about, losing it all. It's too much. Well, Matt, this has been eye-opening. I really appreciate all the advice and everything that you've mentioned when it comes to how we should be thinking about risk, but also the steps that we can be taking to make our futures less stressful. Because we have to admit, any litigation is going to be stressful regardless of which side you're on. So, let's take some out of that. So how can listeners connect with you and learn more about your services?
So I'm Matt Meredith. It is Meridian Legal Advisors, MERIDIANLG.com. So meridianlg.com. We are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. I am on LinkedIn. I have to learn marketing, so I'm everywhere now. And so you can always find me somewhere, and there's phone numbers and emails listed on the website. Reach out to me. I am Texas-based jurisdiction, but we can advise in a lot of other areas, of course, taxes, federal, and things like that. So even if you have questions and you're not in Texas, give us a call. We're always happy to talk, see what we can do with you.
Right on. Thanks again for being on the show.
It was a pleasure, Daniel. Thanks, Pat.
It's not every day you get to talk to a lawyer and a financial advisor at the same time, let alone in the same person. And that's one of the rare things about Matt Meredith. And it's why I wanted him on the show. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, because what Matt made crystal clear is that we have to be proactive about protecting the wealth that we work so hard to build. Because a single bad incident without the right protections already in place, that can just wash everything away. And if you're like me, you probably went most of your life never paying for a lawyer. You might have even neglected to set up basic legal protections, maybe even delaying creating that will that you keep thinking that you'll get around to. And we are not alone in that. According to a 2025 Caring.com will survey, only 24% of Americans have a will. And that's down from 33% in 2022. And it gets worse when you zoom out. According to Trust and Will's 2025 estate planning report, the largest study of its kind, 55% of Americans have no estate planning documents at all. No will, no trust, no legal plan. That is a lot of unprotected wealth sitting out in the open. And those numbers do not just describe people with nothing. They describe people who actually built things. Houses, businesses, brokerage accounts, retirement money, all of it exposed. That is exactly what predatory plaintiffs and creditors are built to find. And Matt said it plainly. Lawyers, plaintiffs, and creditors do not pursue poor people. They pursue collectible judgments. The very thing that make us financially independent, a brokerage account, a paid-off rental, a small business that finally works, those are the same things that put a quiet target on us. The target appears the moment we cross a threshold. And we rarely notice it ourselves because we're too busy worrying about the next tax bill or the next quarter's returns to think about that estate plan or the legal protections or the insurance that defends all that we've built. And it's not just the lawsuit itself that hurts. It's the cost of defending against it. Even when you're completely in the right, walking into court costs money, tens of thousands, sometimes more. People come to the table to settle because it's better than nothing, and patience is in short supply. A plaintiff with little to lose can squeeze you for $50,000 just to make the case go away. If there is one big thing to take away, it's this. Protection is not retaining a fancy lawyer. It's the documents and the guidance that lawyer helps you put in place. It's the LLC that separates your business liabilities from your personal name, set up properly so a creditor cannot reach through it. It's putting the right beneficiaries on the right accounts so that the people you actually want to inherit your money do, instead of your wishes getting frozen in probate. And it's the estate plan with a proper trust, so your intentions get carried out after you are gone. When done well, it can also save your heirs from estate taxes and the slow grind of probate fees. And of course, it's the umbrella insurance policy that sits on top of your auto and homeowners coverage, the type of coverage that a lot of us end up missing. And look, standard auto and homeowners liability typically caps out somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. And after that, the judgment comes straight out of your savings. $1 million of umbrella coverage averages around $380. And each additional million usually adds about $75. For roughly $1 a day, you can put a real wall between your assets and a bad afternoon. At the end of the day, protection is not a single document. It's a structure. As we conclude, I want to emphasize how much I appreciated Matt's approach. Law, tax strategy, and financial planning are not separate conversations. When they sit in one room, the tax savings often pay for the legal structure. The legal structure protects the assets the financial plan is building, and the estate plan keeps it all going past you. When run in silos, each piece costs more and protects less. Yet when run together, they can pay for themselves. We are here to escape the clock and live our best lives. Being financially independent is not about accumulating enough money. It's not at all. It's the discipline of having enough and sustaining it for the long run so that you can always prioritize your agenda over others, regardless of who comes knocking. Do you have a legal story of your own? Are you interested in sharing it with the community? Email me at contact@escapetheclock.com with the subject line Protect. I'm Daniel C. Rogers. Thanks for listening, and best of luck bulletproofing what you've built and escaping the clock. I'll see you next week. That's a wrap on this episode of Escape the Clock. Everything you've heard today is for educational purposes only, designed to help you think, plan, and build a stronger financial program. Take what resonates, bring it into your Escape the Clock plan, and review it with a qualified professional before making any major moves. The book, the free planner, and the one-on-one time with me are all waiting for you at escapetheclock.com. If this episode was valuable, please leave a rating, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll catch you next week.